Well, it's a pleasure to be here in Wisconsin. You know, it's Wisconsin, like California, has a long progressive tradition. And the time has come when we begin to face what consequences that really brings. And if you're at all familiar with the politics in California, I can tell you that in California, we're in real trouble. But it's said that as California goes, so will go the rest of the country. And that's why it's important that the rest of the country understand what's happening in California and, in fact, understand what's happening in their states. Because the Sustainable Development Program, which is really launched like a missile in California, it's here, it's everywhere, and it's something we all need to come to know about. I want to thank the Rock River Patriots and the Wisconsin 912 group for having this function and functions like this, because you're not going to get the message from your local legislator. You're not going to get this message from your congressman. No one in Washington, D.C. is going to deliver this message. And that's why it takes us, ordinary citizens, working for a future in America, because at the present time, that future looks to be short-lived and ominous. Throughout history, government owned the citizens. Some forms of authority were violent, others managed the people for the benefit of the rulers. No society recognized the value of the individual, much less the individual's sovereignty, until 1776. America was the exception to centralized authority. That is our heritage. The foundation of America rests on the political recognition of each individual's natural or unalienable rights. Today, that recognition is lacking. Resurrecting that idea is why freedom advocates exist. Valuing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, coupled with an honest monetary system, predicated on the practices of a moral citizenry, produced a society where individuals were free to pursue their lives. Liberty requires a foundation. We all gain in such a society. For example, free enterprise based upon an honest monetary system grows standards of living and advances human achievement at a pace consistent with the nature of humanity. The challenge today is how to restore government's role as the protector of life, liberty, and property. Woefully, our government has abandoned the commitment to the protection of individual liberty and to honest money. As a consequence, America flounders. Instead, a new philosophy with an accompanying action plan has been inserted. This action plan intends for humans to take on the status of livestock. The point is that power has been allowed to consolidate and grow. Our political and economic systems are controlled by a globalist monetary system that intends to create a one-world governance society, already equipped with an international framework that includes the United Nations, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and the Bank of International Settlements. A new political economic system is well advanced. Today, the globalist objective is to work at the local level to monitor and control human action. For this, the globalists have a plan. The plan is called Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. So what is Agenda 21? Well, Agenda 21 is a document that outlines the implementation of sustainable development, which is a comprehensive plan for the restructure of society and the remake of mankind. Sustainable development is a communitarian program that is designed to transform people into the globalist ideal of the new man. This concept requires individuals to become subservient to the needs of the community. Individual rights are lost. You become an asset or a liability to the community, and you're treated accordingly. After nearly 20 years of implementation, I can report that sustainable development policy is now deeply embedded in every county in America. It is time for all Americans to understand that sustainable development is not about protecting the environment. You can see from this website that sustainable development is a United Nations program. This is their webpage. We didn't make it. Sustainable Development Agenda 21. It says that Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. And remember, they contend that every breath you take is an impact on the environment. The Commission on Sustainable Development was created in December of 1992 to ensure effective follow-up of UNCED, a UN agency, to monitor and report on the implementation of agreements at the local, national, regional, and international levels. The United States reports the federal agency progress on implementing Agenda 21. And it did this in 2002 for the Johannesburg Earth Summit, held 10 years after the original Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. This is the United States of America country profile, which outlines, up to that date, the implementation of Agenda 21 in the United States. The same kind of report was issued in 2012 at the the most recent Rio Earth Summit. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is the modern battlefield over future political economics and more. Despite its appearance as an environmental movement, Agenda 21 incorporates decades of UN world governance policies. Agenda 21 was written for and disseminated at the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit in 1992. 178 nations signed on, including then-President George Bush the father, signing on behalf of the United States. The last 4 presidents, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and both major party candidates for the 2012 presidential election have made implementation of Agenda 21 the quiet cornerstones of their careers. Now, Agenda 21 Sustainable Development is the action plan for the implementation of a controlled society. The plan is not conjecture. It is laid out in several documents. First is the Agenda 21 Global Plan. On the left here, you see Agenda 21 Earth Summit, a program from Action for Rio is what they say. And the document on the right is the local Agenda 21 Planning Guide. Now, this document was prepared by an organization called ICLEI. How many people have heard of ICLEI? Oh, that's the highest percentage I've seen anywhere in the country where I've given similar presentations. That's good. That's a good beginning. Your state is not overwhelmed with ICLEI organizations, but I can tell you the influence of ICLEI is overwhelming Wisconsin. I'll talk more about ICLEI as the evening proceeds. Now, this is my county, Santa Cruz County on the central coast of California. Their Agenda 21 program, it's called Santa Cruz County Local Agenda 21, a Sustainable Community Action Plan or Agenda for the 21st Century. This was actually adopted by our Board of Supervisors for implementation in 1997. Not many people in Wisconsin had even heard of Agenda 21 that early, but in California and in Santa Cruz particularly, we were really a sample patch ground for the internationalist movement going back into the 1970s. And so we got our program early, which got me an early start in understanding what this is all about. You see, local implementation is what proves how serious this program is. Remember, Agenda 21 describes itself as a comprehensive plan. Only a few communities have titled their plans Agenda 21. You can discover your county's plan or plans, anticipate sweet-sounding titles including Sustainable Fresno, Vision, vision's a big word in their lexicon, 2030, or Milwaukee Green. Now, the second document of the Agenda 21 blueprint is the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment Report. This document is 1,150 pages. It is the guidebook for the worldwide environmental action movement. And in order to proceed with that environmental action and to save the environment, this official document calls for a reduction of human population and puts nature before man. Page 773 of that document actually says the following: population growth has exceeded the capacity of the biosphere. That's a false premise. The Earth supports us. If we have access to Earth's resources and using the capacity of the human being to create and renew, there's an endless source of resources on this world. But because of this false premise, the globalists have determined have determined the following alternatives. First, it is estimated that in an agricultural world in which most human beings are peasants, their word, not mine, population should be able to support 5 to 7 billion people. Gee, there are 7 billion people today. If we all go live in huts as peasants and do the work that we're assigned, most of us would be allowed to survive. But in a more frugal European standard of living, 2 billion to 3 billion would be possible. That means more than 50% of the population would have to be eliminated. But in contrast, they go on to say, a reasonable estimate for an industrialized world society at the present standard of North America would be limited to a population of 1 billion. That's a reduction in human population of 85%. So based on this false premise, the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report also calls for the abolition of private property by directing the elimination of suburban housing, ranching, fossil fuels, dams, reservoirs, and much, much more. Today, I will show how this process is unfolding. The third document is Sustainable Development's short Bible. It's called the Earth Charter. It was authored by Stephen Rockefeller, the son of Nelson Rockefeller, Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet dictator, and a man named Maurice Strong. Now, Strong was the Secretary General of the United Nations at the 92 Earth Summit. He's a Canadian oil billionaire who is now residing in China, leading the Agenda 21 program there. He's in China because he had to flee Western justice for his role in the infamous UN oil for food scandal. Now, each of these three authors has proclaimed that the Earth Charter is to replace the Ten Commandments. We can laugh, and we ought to in one sense, but the reality is this: the Earth Charter and its principles are taught in American schools in substitution for American principles. If you've got an elementary school child in the government schools, you can bet for sure that before they get out of school, they know all about the Earth Charter. Mom and Dad may not, but they will. The Earth Charter centralizes all authority over humanity. You see, centralization of human power combined with a proclamation of total authority is known to be a scary proposition. Now, to help you recognize local infiltration of sustainable policies, I'm going to share with you a Freedom Advocates tool for showing the warm and fuzzy terms that arise regularly. These terms reveal Agenda 21 in operation. This is a partial list. Go ahead and take a few moments and review these terms. I'll mention a few of these, which I'm going to highlight as we move along. The 3 E's here, the first one's mentioned: environment, economy, and equity. Consensus, friends of. Have you heard of any friends of organizations in Wisconsin? Action, social justice, public-private partnership, regional, comprehensive plan. I mean, comprehensive plan is all over the world today. You know, I thought human beings might have learned after the Russian and Chinese experiments with their 5 and 10 and 20-year plans, but not so. In America today, every town is adopting a 5, 10, or 20-year comprehensive plan. You see, Agenda 21 rarely calls itself by that name. Instead, warm and fuzzy terms are used. Now, supporters of Agenda 21 use a mantra illustrated by the 3E pattern. The 3 E's represent a summarization of Agenda 21's blueprint. The oft-repeated 3 E's concept looks and works like this. The first E is equity. Sometimes this is characterized as social, but by equity, they mean the use of sociology for group conditioning, the stuff that Bev was talking about this afternoon, and a replacement system of justice called social justice in order to re-engineer humanity into a world collective. The second E is economy. By economy, what is meant is the international redistribution of America's wealth through trade policy, foreign policy, bailouts, and more. It also means the replacement of free enterprise with government-private business partnerships, the so-called public-private partnerships that we're seeing all over America today. Benito Mussolini called the same system corporatism, and of course Adolf Hitler called it economic fascism. That is what public-private partnership is in essence. Now, the third E that sucks the average American in is the environment. But the globalists by environment don't have a normal meaning. By environment, they mean putting nature before man. This is the premise that nurtures the globalist call for a massive reduction in human population. This accounts for the rise of earth worship, or Gaia, which is intended as the dawning of a new world religion. My purpose is not to scare you, but to alert you to globalism's implementation of the Agenda 21 Sustainable Development Global to Local Action Plan. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is why the defense of America begins in your neighborhood, your hometown, and the broader local community. Recognizing this fact will compel informed, ordinary American people to gain control of school boards. I tell everybody that I can talk to on this subject, it matters a whole lot more to you who gets elected to the school board where you live this November than it does as to whether Obama or Romney are elected president. Because both Obama and Romney, I guarantee you, will take us further down this course of Agenda 21. Don't think that Romney or the Republican Party are going to be saviors. They are as committed as the Democrats. There is no question about that. In fact, I like to say that globalism dawns from right-wing intellectuals. The foot soldiers work on the left. It is important to understand that Agenda 21 is not a left versus right fight. We can see from this chart the contemporary dialectic bringing a global green cartel to America. That on the left, the collectivist one world left brings us environmentalism and social justice. But the collectivist one world right brings to us public-private partnership. You see, it takes both of these elements to deliver sustainable development. This is the Hegelian dialectic. Two opposites, supposedly, with a compromise. The new world of a government-controlled society and the tyranny that it will bring. It takes the left and the right to deliver that. Now, when I talk about the right being leaders in the sustainable development movement, I'm not talking about ordinary conservative Americans. I'm talking about all the leaders in Washington, D.C. who call themselves conservative. I can't name one Washington politician who will even discuss Agenda 21. Oh, sure, in the debates, Newt Gingrich made mention of it, but Newt Gingrich was one of the architects. Washington, D.C. is lost. Our need is to understand how both sides of the contrived political spectrum contribute to the globalist action plan. Sustainable development policy has infiltrated almost everything. And in that regard, it is worth noting that the Grand Old Party is a member of the International Democrat Union, IDU.org. Nobody's ever heard of the IDU, but the IDU's mission is the universal adoption of the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You see, under the UN system, all law is man-made. Nothing is immutable. George Bush Sr. and former party chairman and now Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour represent Republican leadership at the IDU. This is the purposes page from the IDU website. And we can see here that they say, in the second paragraph, that being committed to advancing the social and political values upon which democratic societies are founded, including the basic personal freedoms and human rights as defined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You see, both major parties are committed to globalism. That is why top leadership of both parties would not approach the issue of party commitment to the implementation of Agenda 21 for 2 decades. Do you think we can trust either one of them now? I'm going to contrast the difference between American philosophy of individual rights with a globalist philosophy of community rights, because that's what we're really fighting about. In the U.S., the nature of our rights are individual. The source protecting those rights is our Declaration of Independence. The purpose of government under the American system is to protect the natural or unalienable rights of each individual, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable, not inalienable, unalienable rights. Let's contrast that with the UN system, where the nature of rights belong to the community. The source of this system is the UN Declaration of Human Rights, where the purpose of government is to control the individual for the greater good of a global community. Now, in that document, Article 29, Section C, it actually says, quote, "Rights and freedoms may be in no case exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United States." I'm sorry. Thank you, of the United Nations. I'm already thinking about George Bush Sr. and the Republican Party's commitment to the IDU, which is committed to this. It's no wonder it doesn't matter who we elect to Washington, D.C., because if you're a Republican and you don't go along with this, at the bottom line level, you're out. You see, government under this system grants, restricts, or withdraws your rights according to its needs. You and the product of your labor belong to the community. Contrast that with the United States system, where you're born with rights. Government exists to protect those rights. You and the product of your labor belong to you. At least that's the theory, and that was the origin for the basis of the American experiment. Now, the judicial system that protects individual rights is based on a principle of freedom called equal justice. Equal justice supports true diversity. a respect for the independence and the unalienable rights of the individual, and genuine respect for individuality. Equal justice protects us from mob rule. A system of human rights or community rights operates to pursue social justice, which can be defined as law formulated to obtain government's social objectives at the expense of individual liberty. The Sustainable Development Agenda is based on the principle that the collective good and democracy are more important than recognizing unalienable rights in the Republic. The Republic, which was designed to protect those individual rights. The Sustainable Development Agenda is in direct opposition to America's cornerstone principle of equal justice. Equal justice is the wonder within mankind's greatest achievement, and that was the signing of our Declaration of Independence. There are three broad principles that underlie Agenda 21. First is the step-by-step program for the abolition of private property. They've come a long ways. The second is education for global citizenship. Do you think the notion of unalienable rights is presented in today's schools? Take notice of the number of young sustainablers, many of whom identify themselves as global citizens. Universities are building an army of young college graduates, some with degrees in sustainability. For even younger people, there are the policies and assessments of No Child Left Behind, all geared to neuter the next generation's understanding of liberty and of the American experiment while training them to become serfs. The third driving principle of Agenda 21 is control over human action. For instance, we see technological advances used by government to monitor the individual. We see this happening through federal legislation that would direct biometric identification of you embedded on your state driver's license. We see the advent of cameras everywhere, of internet health records, of TSA body grabbers. Now we have drones, GPS or other satellite technologies that can watch and trace every move you make. And government-accessible databases, including fusion centers that have everything about you that you always thought was private. Sustainable development is about assessing, monitoring, and controlling you and everybody else. Smart electrical meters. Talk about managing and controlling you. That is why policy for decades has been driving us towards shortages, including the often contrived shortages of electricity and water throughout much of the West. Policy, coupled with technology, has made possible the attainment of centralized management and control over resources and individual action. Smart water is around the corner. As a nation, we have turned our back on water development. In California, water resources are being destroyed. Available water supply has been managed in order to create the shortage that we are now and will increasingly be experiencing. I will focus my next comments on the first objective of Agenda 21, to abolish private property concerning land. But to understand what is at issue, we've got to understand what is private property. You see, private property includes your person. These hands are mine. These hands are my private property. Private property includes your thoughts. And private property includes your relationship to something. It's not the thing itself. It's your ability to control the use of that thing. So that includes living on and working land to the benefit of oneself or for a waiting market. We also have to understand that a fiat money system, that is money made out of thin air, undermines the notion of private property because it defeats free enterprise while enabling public-private partnerships to take over. While lip service is being given to preserving the family farm, independent farmers around the country are being set up to sell to major corporate interests or to conservation groups like the Nature Conservancy, the perfect partners with government in a new age, new world economy and politics. It is time to take notice and then action to restore the Republic. Now, as America implements Agenda 21's land use programs called Smart Growth and the Wildlands Network, recognition of unalienable rights is obliterated. Let me explain these land use programs with the help of this map prepared by Michael Kaufman. This is the simulated reserve and corridor system to protect biodiversity as required by the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. That's the book I talked about earlier. The Wildlands Project, et cetera, as a vital step in attaining sustainable development. Let's define some terms. Wildlands. Wildlands is the removal of people and the resource and the prohibition of resource extraction. These areas are indicated on this map in red. This explains why America's resources are not being tapped. The yellow areas are buffers to the wildlands where public-private partners will engage in limited and controlled activities. Smart growth is the stacking and packing of human beings in dense cities where people will depend upon public transportation and live in walkable communities and be precluded from having automobiles. Smart growth areas, also referred to by the UN as human settlements, are demonstrated by the black dots, focused mainly on the coasts with a few internal dots. There aren't many dots in Wisconsin. The Wildlands Network is helping to create and implement policies and legislation that promote massive land grabs. Ladies and gentlemen, smart growth and the Wildlands Network is why you're here tonight. You're seeing the same plans that are overwhelming California and other places. The same types of plans and the programs and the proponents are now in every town in America. The Wildlands Network and smart growth policies are an epidemic everywhere in the U.S., not just here in Wisconsin. The land policy of the United Nations was first officially articulated at the UN Conference on Human Settlements in Vancouver, Canada, 1976. This is a quote from the preamble of the UN policy on land developed at that conference. Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of the accumulation and concentration of wealth and therefore contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Their schemes, their word again. Public control, they conclude, of land use is therefore indispensable. If private property and freedom are inseparable, as George Washington said, freedom is in trouble. Roadless areas. Do you have roadless areas beginning to dawn here in Wisconsin? They're popping up all over California, especially in the mountains. You get to the road and this is what it says. You see, access to the wonderful open areas become more and more restricted until we're simply told, keep out. Here's a sign I like a lot. The National Wildlife Refuge. Unauthorized entry prohibited. Area beyond this sign closed. All public entry prohibited. Well, this land is in my hometown, La Selva Beach, California. It used to be a land owned by a berry farmer. But this berry farmer went up to the University of California at Santa Cruz with a little salamander he found on his property. He wanted to know what that salamander was. Well, it was decreed a long-toed salamander and put on the endangered species list. They stole his property, put up signs. The people in the town who thought they were going to be able to hike on this man's property were disappointed too, because these are the signs that popped up. This is what's happening all across the country. I'm going to talk now about the NAFTA superhighway trade corridor and toll road system. Congress has succumbed to regionalism on a grand scale. I call it 1984 style. The Trans-Texas Corridor is or was an implementing element of the Continental Security and Prosperity Partnership Agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. The SPP intends to create a single North American security zone, borderless trade, unified transportation systems, and a harmonization of our laws as a core for a continental union similar in nature to the European Union. You might say, oh, that won't happen in America. Be careful. Citizens turned back Governor Perry's, a Republican, and the Texas legislature's, Republican, dogged and dirty schemes to misrepresent the nature, scope, and national sovereignty threat inherent in the nature of this public-private partnership. The Trans-Texas Corridor proposed the sale of state highways to a foreign multinational corporation who would then charge residents to drive the road after the residents' tax monies had built the road. The transportation and utility line scheme, it's not just transportation, it's all the utilities, is intended to reach Pacific ports in central Mexico, heading north and crossing the border at Corpus Christi, spread out through Texas, expand across the United States with similar international financing schemes, and then roll into smart growth enclaves into Canada. Think of the European common market of the third quarter of the 20th century. The growing trend of public-private partnership is designed to further indebt and subjugate the citizenry to an international cartel designed to advance the political economics of world government, region by region. Texas's real citizens drove the TTC into submission. But the concept is back after we enjoyed a 2-year hiatus from Perry et al. This time the attack comes from the federal government. Congress passed a bill authorizing construction of not one, but 3 continental distribution systems. This bill passed in 2012, the House Senate Transportation Conference, MAP 21. Terry Hall, founder of Texans Uniting for Reform and Freedom, and who was the organization I think most responsible for defeating in the earlier stage the Trans-Texas Corridor, has written the following, quote, "Some have tried to convince the public that the Trans-Texas Corridor and the NAFTA superhighway are dead, never existed, or are even a myth. Yet Congress recently passed a new 2-year federal highway bill called Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century. That shortens down to MAP, Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, that not only gives priority funding to these high priority trade corridors, but also makes it easier to hand them over to private, multinational corporations using controversial public-private partnership contract arrangements that promote and enhance the tolling of America at the taxpayer's expense. Now, 1, 2, 3 intercontinental U.S. corridors are planned by the federal government. Change agent determination does not easily abate. This is but one illustration of the boatloads of American policy pursuits which are motivated by internationalist objectives. Each of us must find out the focus of the Agenda 21 pursuit operating in your area and then take action against it, or become prepared to live in a regulated regional enclave that operates with a much different set of mores and values. America is being transformed right under our noses and in full view of those that are willing to see. I'm going to shift focus again and review how our constitutional government is being transitioned into one of globalized central control. To understand this, let's understand regionalism. The American political structure has been transformed. This has been occurring for over 50 years without public awareness of the mechanisms underlying that change. Today, the effect of a communitarian philosophical approach to government dominates public expectations and legislative agendas. At the core of this transformation is the political process of regionalizing the country. Political regionalization is the antithesis of representative government. Regionalism restructures or reinvents the operation of American government. What you will learn is that regionalism is the blueprint, one of those warm and fuzzy terms, for your serfdom. It has infiltrated cities and counties everywhere, affecting your transportation, water, farming, land use systems, city and county operations, essentially every aspect of government. Regionalism is being used to destroy traditional political boundaries, such as county lines. Regionalism ushers in a transformed system of government that ultimately abolishes private property. Let's start this analysis with an example showing how Agenda 21 programs are brought into your area via regionalism. Here is a look at an excerpt from the United Nations Agenda 21 document concerning transportation planning. I'm going to use this as an example of how regionalists take control of our lives. Chapter 7, dealing with human settlements. Promoting urban transport systems in all countries should be a, again, comprehensive approach to urban transport planning and management. To this end, all countries should encourage development patterns that reduce transport demand. Well, that means building smart growth walkable communities. That's what they're talking about here. That's what we're doing. 2, adopt urban transport programs favoring high occupancy public transport. I don't know about you, but the push for buses in California, the push for high-speed rail in California, the existence of carpool lanes in California is matched everywhere else. We're doing exactly what Agenda 21, Chapter 7 on human settlements requires. And encourage non-motorized vehicles of transport by providing, this is our new form of transportation, safe cycleways. Bicycles in Wisconsin in February. It sounds like a lot of fun, even if you're a teenager. And footways in urban and suburban centers. You're to walk or ride a bike. That's the plan the globalists have. You see, the problem with this is that your towns are adopting these transport systems. This is because these systems are imposed upon locales by a regional level of government largely unknown, and when known, always underestimated. Regionalism is a very important political concept. regionalism has overtaken the country. The large-scale version of U.S. adoption of modern regionalism is a federally imposed, extra-constitutional layer of government that covers the entire nation. A few exceptions, I'll talk about that later. Regionalism might sound benign, but the consequences must be understood by freedom-loving people, or liberty will be trampled. Regionalism is really their secret weapon, because ever since Eisenhower introduced it in the 1950s, Reagan brought it to California in the 1970s. All things have changed, but nobody really sees the regional outfits. The press doesn't report on the nature of the regional outfits. You believe your city council still makes the decisions. They don't. According to the website of the National Association of Regional Councils, it's called NARC. We all thought we knew what NARCs were, but this takes on a much more ominous significance. National Association of Regional Councils serves as the national voice of regionalism through effective, and it is, interaction and advocacy with Congress, federal officials, and other agencies and interest groups. Now, NARC says its agenda includes, but is not limited to, imagine if you can think of much more they could be involved with: transportation, community and economic development, environment, homeland security, regional preparedness, and community issues. Under those umbrellas, you could park most anything. But in addition to NARC, citizens must know about the following regional planning and development agencies that work to implement NARC's goals: councils of government, so-called COGs, and metropolitan planning organizations, MPOs. How many people have heard of councils of governments or COGs? Okay, many fewer, and that's typical. This is who runs everything. So let me tell you what a council of government is. They are region-wide associations of local governments. Regional bodies typically defined to serve an area of several counties to address issues such as regional and municipal planning, economic and community development, cartography and government information GIS systems, hazard mitigation, emergency planning, aging services, water use, pollution control, transit administration, and transportation planning. What is it they don't do? They tell your city how they must implement plans in accordance with their model on all those subjects. The voters don't know that. We think when we vote for Bob Smith for city council, he's going to be making these decisions for us. But no, when Bob gets on the council, it's the regional COG that tells him what he's got to do. And he does it. And he does it. People need to start running for office who don't do it. Who don't do what the COGs tell you. The COGs are totally extra-constitutional, meaning they're not constitutional at all. But they're running our country. In Wisconsin, COGs are called regional planning commissions. Let's see the hands on that. Okay. All right, now you're showing yourselves for what you are. RPCs run your town and your county from behind the scenes. Federal funds allocated to RPCs coordinate the local implementation of Agenda 21. But I also mentioned metropolitan planning organizations. Let's take a look at what they are. An MPO is an agency created by federal law to provide local input for urban transportation planning and allocating federal transportation funds to cities with populations greater than 50,000. MPOs are federally mandated, and like COGs and RPCs, they are the instrument for restructuring American government. They are setting up an infrastructure for a new economic system based upon public-private partnership in replacement of free enterprise. RPCs and MPOs are federalized organizations that break down America's constitutionally formulated governmental structure. Their purpose is to control and direct local government from behind the scenes. Today, they propel the federal injection of the globalist agenda into local government policy and thereby negate the protections afforded by our constitutional system of government. This violation of the American essence and of our natural rights must be stopped. Wisconsin has 14 metropolitan planning organizations that share responsibility for transportation planning in 17 metropolitan areas. Wisconsin Department of Transportation works closely with MPOs to assure, there we go again, that word, comprehensive, coordinated approach to local, regional. How does a government agency be talking about regionalism and state transportation planning in Wisconsin's urbanized areas? This is again from, as was the last one, from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, their plans and projects. And here they're commenting on regional planning commissions. Wisconsin has 9 regional planning commissions, all but 5 counties in the state, including this one, Jefferson, one of the few places in the country that doesn't have an MPC, a regional planning commission, are served by an RPC. Wisconsin Department of Transportation works closely with RPCs to ensure a comprehensive, coordinated approach to local, regional, and state issues affecting transportation planning. Well, they do a lot more than that, as we've already discussed. But in Wisconsin, RPCs are formed by executive order of the governor. He needs to undo those executive orders and provide intergovernmental planning and coordination for the physical, social, and economic, those are the 3 E's in a different form, development of a region. It's important to understand that when your state is working with a regional planning commission, they are surrendering all notions of Wisconsin sovereignty because they're doing exactly what the feds are telling them. With the strings attached, with the carrot sticks of cash given out, all for the implementation of the development of the Agenda 21 infrastructure. That means stack and pack housing. You get to go on the 32nd floor and you walk to work or you ride your bike. That may sound bizarre, but look around. That's what's happening. Here's a map. You think you've got so many counties in this country, but here are the 9 regions. You know, Dane County is a region of its own. Well, those of us who live in state university towns are all in the same boat. I mean, Santa Cruz, Madison, they're like twins. You know, Berkeley, you throw that one. I mean, Iowa City, it doesn't matter. If there's a state university, a land-grant college in your town, you're really knee-deep in this stuff, and people in Dane know that. But the 5 counties that are not members of a regional planning commission are somewhat of an anomaly around all of America. The only areas I've identified up until this presentation that were not part of a COG, or its equivalent, RPCs here in Wisconsin, were areas that were federal lands in states like Nevada or Montana. But these aren't federal lands, these are independent counties. So are you living in the right spot here in Jefferson? Well, don't get too excited, because there's more to come. You see, the RPCs and the MPOs are running your towns. They dictate major zoning decisions, infrastructure decisions, and a whole lot more. In the words of Charlotte Iserbyt, former Department of Education official and author of The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, regionalism is communism. Regionalism promotes Soviet-style councils that develop policy that is then rubber-stamped by elected officials with no meaningful public oversight. It is an extra level of government that operates outside the provisions of the Constitution, thus advancing globalist objectives while insulating most elected officials. In short, American regionalism is the instrument used to advance these globalist goals of political restructure. RPCs and American regionalism implement a step-by-step approach to the abolition of private property. They promote the relocation of people from rural areas to smart growth urban centers, and they conscript public-private partners and mandate community volunteerism. The government no longer operates the way the traditional 8th grade textbook explained it. People know that a Soviet system of government is a dismal failure. A failure so bad, in fact, that it's inconceivable to consider that Soviet-style change agents might actually be Americans living and working in our own neighborhoods. Even worse would be to discover that your smiling political leaders might also be agents of change. In fact, there is a whole Soviet system of councils, including MPOs and COGs, RPCs, that are directing your local government. But most people just knew that the Soviet Union was bad, but never understood what the word Soviet really meant. So let's examine what a Soviet is. A Soviet is a system of councils that report to an apex council and implement a predetermined outcome affecting a region or a neighborhood, often arranged through a process of facilitated consensus. You heard Bev talk a long time today about facilitated consensus. It is the core of a Sovietized system. Members of a Soviet council are chosen by virtue of their willingness to comply and their one-mindedness with the group. Again, that's exactly what you see in these visioning sessions that are going on in every city in America today. Soviets are the operating mechanism of a government-controlled economy, whether it be socialism or public-private partnership. A Soviet is a hierarchical system of interconnected councils that work to destroy individual liberty, suppress individual potential, and centralize into the hands of those who seek to control all human action and human production. The scary part is that these Sovietized federal regional organizations are throughout the country, but the battle is always local. Our prospects for the future hang in the balance. Restoring the American Republic requires that political regionalism be terminated. Now, there is an issue that has arisen in areas recently across the country. Several in the freedom movement have called for the municipal creation of property right councils. The argument is that government officials need input. People say the government needs the input from these special interests. Property right councils does not exist in the operation of the American Republic. Property right councils would themselves become Soviets. I know of a city up in northern Idaho that jumped on this bandwagon, made last year the creation of this property right council, and today it's controlled totally by Agenda 21 agents. So property rights itself in that county is being redefined officially under a government authorized council that was formed for that purpose. The creation of such boards means the fall of the Republic. If 100 communities created property right councils, we would have substantially more than 100 definitions of what private property is. To barter or reconstrue the meaning of private property through a Soviet council is the abandonment of American principles. Now let's examine another important aspect of the local Agenda 21 action plan, and that is the organization ICLEI. Now ICLEI's real name is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. It's now also called Local Governments for Sustainability. This is the most vulnerable globalist organization operating in America today simply because they are an international UN partner working under contract with local governments and other regional Soviets. Remember, this book I showed you earlier is one of the Agenda 21 guiding documents. This book was prepared by the ICLEI organization. From ICLEI's webpage, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, ICLEI is an international association of local governments implementing sustainable development. Who, when you were a teenager, which of us would have ever thought that there would be an organization, an international organization, with contracts with American cities to bring in this foreign Sovietized system of government and not have the citizens throw out every city manager at all connected with this stuff? It just amazes me, but it's what's happened. ICLEI's mission is to build and serve a worldwide movement of local governments. A worldwide movement of local governments. They mean it too. To achieve tangible improvements in global environmental and sustainable development conditions through cumulative local actions. Now, ICLEI is an important NGO that uses the fraud of man-made global warming and climate change as a scare tactic and as a legislative tool. ICLEI has formed an international Congress filled with city and county representatives coming from America and everywhere else. This Congress acts today as a shadow world government. ICLEI directs local governments in America and provides statutory and regulatory provisions that implement globalist sustainable policy locally. Now, when we started our attack on ICLEI about 2 years ago, the ICLEI representative from Oakland, California, said, we're incorporated in Delaware. We're not an international organization. These are the ICLEI offices around the world. The World Secretariat for ICLEI is in Bonn, Germany. In America, it's mostly been run out of Oakland, California. But it's clearly an international NGO that was in bed with the UN with the formation of Agenda 21. ICLEI was formed in 1990. Agenda 21 came out in 1992. What do we do? Well, Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution makes the following prohibition. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation with a foreign political entity. And so neither may a city. So we've got to ask a question. Is it treasonous for city and state leaders to contract with ICLEI, an international NGO accredited by the United Nations for the purpose of implementing Agenda 21 and for participation in a World Congress? I mean, I went to law school, never talked about these kinds of issues, of course, but I can read. It's pretty darn clear. And the history of the United States is consistent with that. We don't allow foreign operatives to run our city governments. Those are the cities you need to deal with. Now in California, we have 178 ICLEI cities. The fruits and nuts are falling into the ocean. But it's not just your city. ICLEI now announces that 2 states, 1 system. This is regionalism on a grand scale. Historic, Michigan and Wisconsin, climate cooperation partnership emerges through the local action plan of ICLEI. In September, the states agreed to meet. Next month, ICLEI will release its adaptation database and planning tool a resource designed to help local governments determine their vulnerability to climate change and create a resiliency strategy that is socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable. Well, the same old verbiage, but the problem is you've got your city and state officials combining cross-state borders to create a region designed by ICLEI. Citizens in this state must rise together, kick ICLEI out. Let's look at something that I call a Kremlin, American style. A Soviet club. New members are approved by current members only. This is the ICLEI North Star Local Government Sustainability Network. The North Star Sustainability Network is a forum for top-level municipal professionals. They're going to feel really important. You know, it's like the person that Bev talked about. He was all excited because he was appointed to as a change agent. You know, these guys, these change agents, think they're important because they get to be part of the network. Who can join this network? Well, it says you got to be approved by the current members. New members are subject to approval by existing members. Wow. That's how you want government to operate, don't you? Insiders, Kremlin appointing each other to what it is they each need. Now, I recommend you visit the Freedom Advocates website, freedomadvocates.org, and review the ICLEI primer and get started on kicking ICLEI out of Wisconsin now. That is the first step we take in restoring the Republic. Now, there is a light beginning to shine on ICLEI. ICLEI represents a pattern of governmental infiltration in America. As the light begins to shine, local officials show which side of the great battle they are on. And a lot of them are on the wrong side. Because if you want to rise in the Democrat Party, if you want to rise in the Republican Party, you have to be quiet about Agenda 21. Contracts with ICLEI guarantee implementation of international political and economic policy at the local level. The number of communities with citizens working to remove ICLEI is expanding as citizens begin to tie the links between ICLEI and Agenda 21. ICLEI has lost 20% of its members in the last year and a half since citizens began to fight back. So there are things to do. America will not revive without kicking ICLEI out of the country, but the more challenging and difficult step is withdrawing from the COGS or the RPCs in this state and other regional governing organizations. And there's no better place to begin that process than in America's heartland. So before I get into your local Agenda 21 programs following a short break, I'm going to give you a brief description of 3 congressional breaches of constitutional authority that opened the door for the implementation of the global to local action plan of Agenda 21. Now, the major ongoing constitutional breaches undertaken by Congress include the following. There's more. Ownership or management of broad landscapes. Federal ownership and management of broad landscapes. The delegation of American trade policy to international institutions. And the delegation of monetary authority to a private consortium. Let's deal with the first one first. Federal ownership or management of broad landscapes. With the implementation of the Wildlands Network is a violation of Article 1, dealing with the legislative branch, Section 8, dealing with the legislative process of the U.S. Constitution. The federal government owns about 30% of the land in this country. But there's no authority in the Constitution for federal ownership of broad landscapes. The federal government's ownership of land is limited to military purposes. Article 1, Section 8, read it. There's no right for the federal government to own Yellowstone. Those are state lands. In Nevada, the federal government owns 95% of the land in the state of Nevada. There's no provision in the Constitution allowing for that. In fact, it's unconstitutional for the federal government to own that much land, to own any of that land. The Constitution, you see, was written to protect the unalienable rights of people, not to abrogate them through federal ownership. The Wildlands Network works to abrogate unalienable rights, and it is only through federal ownership of land that the Wildlands Project would even ever have been considered. Second, the delegation of trade policy to international institutions. Congress delegated authority over U.S. trade policy to the World Trade Organization and to various multi-trade pact organizations. This necessarily abrogates national sovereignty. The effects of surrendering trade policy control include a disintegrating border. The constitutional taxing authority under Article 1, Section 9 becomes neutered. American industries are lost to the globalization process. You've certainly felt that here in Wisconsin. Average American earner wages are reduced to global norms. That's the intent. And multinational corporations profit from cheap, often slave labor overseas without any trade import when they go to sell their goods in America. You see, American involvement in the World Trade Organization is designed to destroy the nation. You can't blame that on liberals. You see, conservative leadership in America has done the same thing that we might presume liberal leadership has been looking to do. And the third congressional breach is the delegation of monetary authority. This is another long-standing abrogation of the constitutional responsibilities of Congress. And this abrogation comes from the creation of a globalist system of central banks. And that results in the loss of our constitutional and honest monetary system. This action provides the indispensable ingredient for creating world government. Congress has no authority to delegate exclusive monetary system authority to a third party. The current monetary system is designed to cause a financial collapse, which allows the opportunity for further consolidation and strengthening of globalist power. The collapse of the monetary system seems to be in process now. So we need to cause federal land to become private property or state land. We need to reestablish an American-centered trade policy, and we need to abolish the current fiat money system. Each of these constitutional breaches is a pillar upon which globalism and Agenda 21 is being constructed. Now, I recommend you go to freedomadvocates.org and regularly check out the Town Crier to learn about upcoming events as well as to learn about the efforts to fight back against Agenda 21 coming into us from all over the country. For those who are not yet familiar with an understanding of Agenda 21, you can visit and study the subject in depth at Freedom Advocates. Then join in and start and kickstart citizen awareness in your neighborhood. American people's goal must be to rein in the federal government and to get rid of non-elected or regional councils. But how do we do that? Not very easily. To get there, the battle that we can and must win soon is the local battle. Citizens must prevent the arranged development of Agenda 21 policies from being adopted in your town, or reversing those policies when they've already been adopted. This action is being taken in locales all across the country. To win your local war, you must first learn your area's Agenda 21 program, which we will explore in Part 2. The pattern you will see is the same pattern in operation everywhere across America. So let's take another 5 or 7 minute break and we'll be back for Part 2. Thank you very much. Welcome back. It's bad enough to hear Agenda 21 described in global terms or national terms, but where the rubber meets the road is how Agenda 21 comes into your state, comes into your town, and that's what we're going to talk about in this next section. Now, the globalist invasion has occurred right under our noses. Every county in America has its Agenda 21 implementation underway. Your representatives need to understand who they represent, how the American system of government is structured, and how Agenda 21 is designed to change that system so to centralize control over human action. These representatives must be held accountable. At the same time, searching for, acknowledging, and working with the good people in government, if you can find them, is important. In coordination with ICLEI, the regional organizations, including an abundance of NGOs and other public-private partners, are planning together how you and future generations will live. Freedom is not on their agenda. In Part 1, we saw the map of Wisconsin's regional planning commissions. Let's now talk about the Wisconsin statewide organization for regional planning. Association of Wisconsin Regional Planning Commissions. Benefits of regionalism. Comprehensive planning. That term comprehensive planning, remember it on the first Agenda 21 slide that I showed you. It's about comprehensive planning. So what is a comprehensive plan? Their purpose, this is their words, not mine, their purpose is to provide communities with information and policies that will guide future planning and community decisions. Comprehensive plans incorporate a 20-year vision, think China, and provide a rational basis for local land use decisions. Is it rational to abolish private property? You know, the comprehensive plan must include at least all of the below. These items, I'll read them in a moment, but first let me just say that the California COG, which is the same as an RPC, lists the same things. So what we're finding at this regional level is that they're taking control of housing decisions, transportation, utilities and community facilities, agriculture, natural and cultural resources, economic development, and this is my favorite, intergovernmental cooperation. Anybody ever hear of the separation of powers? We're talking about intergovernmental cooperation and land use implementation. That's about socializing and abolishing private property. That's your comprehensive plan. Sustainable development generally works to achieve predetermined or preferred outcomes. Something we learned about from Bev Eckman as she discussed the visioning seances, is what I call them, happening in every community around America. Let's take a look at one of the AWRPC members. This is the Southwestern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. You know, they deal with economic development, transportation, community planning, useful data, that would be scary, regional plans, etc. So land use and sustainability are placed within the 4 environments. None of these are American ideals. They're talking about land use determinations based upon natural, built, economic, and social values. And they take various things here, from natural resources to agriculture to land use and sustainability. It's all nonsense, except that it's all happening. And it's all happening under the direction of your regional planning commission. Again, your cities can't do much without permission and direction from these organizations. The SWW RPC's mission is to implement federal directives as they work to provide intergovernmental planning and coordination of community development, planning, economic development, and transportation. We are advancing forward toward total government. Regional planning is a major tax spending investment. Let me tell you about the San Francisco Bay Area for a moment. Our COG, called ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, has a program called One Bay Area. It takes 101 cities, 7.5 million people, and 7 counties, and puts it under a One Bay Area program. This One Bay Area program has been promised federal funding through the COG of $250 billion over the next 20 years to remake the San Francisco Bay Area, make the main artery between San Jose and San Francisco a public use corridor only, with stack and pack building units all along this 50-mile road that's already developed in a different way, but no private cars are allowed on El Camino Real under this program. $250 billion, assuming the Bay Area doesn't reject the program entirely. The good news is that Tea Party groups and 912 groups and others have begun to understand what's going on, and the battle in California against the regional planning commissions, called COGs in our state, has really begun. It needs to begin here. I know in the Central Valley of California, citizens are actually showing up at these meetings. They expect no citizens. Citizens never show up at their meetings. People need to show up, find out what they're doing, and put a cog in their wheel. Wisconsin's smart growth legislation, 1999 Act 9, quote, requires that all our local governments must have a comprehensive plan by January 1, 2010. This legislation was the work of a coalition of groups, including the Wisconsin Realtors Association. Well, the National Real Estate Association, most people don't know this, is an NGO. That's why the Santa Cruz Realtors and Realty Association is confused as they support the idea of government-controlled housing called affordable housing. You have that here, we have it everywhere. So the foreign agents have infiltrated so many of our institutions and organizations. There are 10,000 NGOs operating in America today to implement Agenda 21 policies. You'd be shocked at who it includes. And the National Real Estate Association is one of those. 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin. You know, there's 1,000 Friends of Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, Iowa, Maryland, and Florida. Don't think these guys are local people. Their influence is globalist through an organization that's spread out all through the United States. The Wisconsin Builders Association is part of that consortium that brought about the smart growth legislation here. The Wisconsin chapter of the American Planning Association, we're going to talk more about them. They're a real problem. And the Wisconsin Council of Regional Planning Organizations. These are the groups that brought you the smart growth legislation in 1999. All that effort was facilitated by faculty from University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's a typical role for state universities, so don't just pick on Wisconsin because, you know, you can hit those Big Ten schools and about every one of them is a problem. Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan. I'd said they didn't have an RPC in Jefferson County, but you got a comprehensive plan anyway. How the heck did that happen? Most cities have a comprehensive plan because it was forced down their throats by a COG or an RPC. Jefferson County somehow escapes the RPC. They just go ahead and do the same thing themselves. I don't understand this. Let's look at it. Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan Update. Phase 1 Economic Vision. That's that word again. Based upon assets and opportunities. Vision building and consensus vision statements. They were tested through a community, this is a visioning process, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and challenges analysis, whatever that means. Consensus vision statements emerge through this process. Remember, consensus vision statements have a predetermined outcome, and they say it emerged through the process. They won their process. If you weren't there, it may be that citizens were objecting. It may be that citizens weren't objecting. It doesn't matter. It's a done deal before they start. Here's Margaret Thatcher's definition of consensus. To me, she says, consensus seems to be the process of abandoning all beliefs, principles, values, and policies in search of something in which no one believes, but to which no one objects. The process of avoiding the very issues that have to be solved merely because you cannot get agreement on the way ahead. What great cause would have been fought and won under the banner, I stand for consensus? Now you can learn to break through the planned consensus meetings operated through facilitation with predetermined outcomes. This is the study that Bev has addressed to perfection. Remember, avoiding consensus is a first line of defense. Speak out if you are at these meetings. Just because Jefferson County isn't part of a COG or RPC, don't think that you aren't being subjected to the regionalist assault. The prime tool for regionalism is the adoption of comprehensive plans. In Jefferson County, your elected officials have brought that to you directly. They say the plan shall serve as a blueprint, that's another one of those warm and fuzzy terms, for a wide range of decisions involving zoning and land division regulation, economic development planning, transportation planning, and environmental protection. We're seeing this again and again. That's the definition of comprehensive plans. That's what the American government is. American government comprehensive planning? What an oxymoron. They go on to say they're going to further implement their comprehensive plan through the approval of the Farmland Preservation Plan. This is from the Jefferson County Water and Conservation Department. The new Farmland Preservation Program. And this is a state program to help with the purchase of agricultural conservation easements. Now, are there any farmers in this audience who have given away conservation easements on their land? None. If any of you know of a farmer who's given a conservation easement, just sweetly let him know that what he's done is destroyed the value of his property. You'll find very few buyers in the open market for any land with a conservation easement. So you know what happens during the course of the 21st century, the time frame for Agenda 21? The conservation easement owner ends up owning the land because he's the only prospective buyer of that land. Conservation easements are the plan for taking Americans' land out of the hands of Americans. Don't enter conservation agreements. With conservation and preservation programs, watch out for organizations like this one, Gathering Waters Conservancy, helping land trusts, landowners, that means the partners, and certain landowners, the partners, and communities protect the plans that make Wisconsin special. Our goal is to increase the amount of protected lands in the state. How do they do that? They do it through conservation easements. Now let's take a look at a metropolitan comprehensive plan. The city of Milwaukee. They too have a comprehensive plan. How does one word get to be so ingrained into all our governmental agencies and subdivisions? Everybody now has a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is the cornerstone of all local land use decisions. How is smart growth incorporated in Milwaukee's comprehensive plan, they ask? Well, let's look. The comprehensive plan covers all areas of smart growth. City of Milwaukee comprehensive plan. They have 13 plan areas. This is Milwaukee, 13 plan areas. It looks like the 9 regions of the RPCs in the state of Wisconsin. You know, everything is formulated down, but on a system totally devoid of American principles. These are all Sovietized principles. Functional and sub-area plans under those 13 area plans. And so what does the city of Milwaukee's comprehensive plan really deal with? Well, just a few things. Land use, transportation, economic development, housing and neighborhoods, cultural and natural resources, community facilities and utilities, and there again we see intergovernmental cooperation. Well, I'd sure like to see government just step back and let the citizens cooperate between themselves. That's the idea of the American experiment. Milwaukee even has an office of environmental sustainability. I've been to a lot of cities that have that. Santa Cruz does, Austin, Texas does. You know, I have to tell you the story, the little conversation I had with the Austin, Texas sustainability manager. She had just recently been transferred from the city of Seattle, where she was sustainability manager. And when I and a fellow from Austin named John Bush approached her and asked her, being videotaped, about aspects of the sustainable plan in the city of Austin, we inquired of her of the population reduction elements of Agenda 21, to which she said, I'll just never forget this, "Oh, well, I don't support that part of it." So we have sustainability managers in cities around the country who think they're picking and choosing what how the globalists are going to implement, as though they have a role in stopping those things they find offensive. When you become a city's sustainability manager, you are all about population reduction. And you start that by destroying the American economy, destroying the American freedoms, and establishing a new system of government in this country. Well, shame on sustainability managers. The city of Madison also has a sustainability plan. That's no surprise to anybody, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know too much about Madison. I just know what land-grant university towns are like, starting with Santa Cruz and Berkeley. The Madison Sustainability Plan, fostering the 3 E's, only they call this social resilience. Something tells me that they think the system's going to fall apart and we're going to have to become resilient. Sustainable Madison. Now this is quite a quote. Sustainability is the ability to meet our needs without compromising the needs of future generations. I'll come back to that in a moment. So they say, join the City of Madison for an important effort in developing the city's sustainability plan. Remember, these are all predetermined outcomes. Advocate for enhancing the jurisdiction and authority of regional planning agency that helps implement the county-wide planning and communication on land use. I mean, here's a city telling the public our authority is under a regional planning agency. Nonsense. Now, this quote on sustainability is the common definition of sustainable development. You'll find it in all the international documents. It originates from Our Common Future, which was released during the 1987 United Nations World Commission on Environment and Development. Then it was called the Brundtland Commission. Now, the chair of the commission was Gro Harlem Brundtland. Brundtland is a Norwegian social democratic politician who served three terms as Prime Minister of Norway and has served as the Director General of the World Health Organization. She is now Special Envoy on Climate Change for the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. So, how does Ms. Brundtland's quote get in to Sustainable Madison? City of Madison picking up on a quote like that from the source like what I've just described. It's mind-blowing. All aspects of life are covered by the Madison Sustainability Plan. Here they are. I'm not going to go into these, but we can see, for those in the back might not be able to see it, natural systems, planning and design, transportation, economic and workforce development. You know, when the city is involved in workforce development, I start to feel like a slave. Economic development, carbon and energy, education, affordable housing, that means government housing, health, arts, design, and culture. What's the government got to do with design and culture? Government, as George Washington said, is force. That's what government is. It's force. Now they're forcing their way into all aspects of our life. Central planning on steroids is what the Madison Sustainability Plan is. So let's review the globalist vision. It means government-controlled housing, getting people out of cars, comprehensive control over human action, with people crammed like sardines and made easily expendable. This is all in accordance with Agenda 21 sustainability policy and objectives. A lot of money is going to fund this. I told you about how much you're paying for the San Francisco Bay Area remake. But the thrust behind Agenda 21 is also the thrust behind the control of the monetary system. So blowing the money, creating an unpayable debt, while creating their new world is of double benefit to the globalists who now control our society. Taxpayers are funding their own demise through sustainability program, including comprehensive plans. The change agents implementing these programs are found within your planning departments, or they could be one of your politically connected 1,000 friends of Wisconsin. Your city's planning department has membership in the American Planning Association. The APA is an NGO and a significant player in Agenda 21's national implementation. Let's take a look at the Wisconsin American Planning Association. Got a list of actions going here, smart growth, et cetera, coming down. But I'm going to take a look at various of these. I'm going to start by looking at the eco-municipality model for sustainable community change. Now that's your planning lingo of the planning agents in whatever city you live in. Because I've never found a city that doesn't have American Planning Association employees. So what is eco-municipality? It aspires to develop an ecologically, economically, and socially, the 3 E's again, healthy community for the long term using the natural step framework for sustainability as a guide. An eco-municipality becomes the driving force for becoming a sustainable community. This comes from the Sustainable Communities Capacity Center, charged with creating these eco-municipalities. And they've done a pretty good job, because these red dots are cities in Wisconsin who have adopted these Sustainable Communities Capacity Center programs. That's a lot of cities. Let's take a look at Natural Step, referred to in this last slide. Natural Step is a nonprofit organization with the vision of creating a sustainable society. It has been at the forefront of international research, good for them, and we've developed, get this, you think climate models are sketchy. How about this one? We've developed a proven, science-based model that helps communities and business better understand and integrate the 3 E considerations. My, these guys must be magicians. So the Natural Step is involved in Sustain Jefferson, sustainable solutions for a sustainable world. Jefferson meaning Jefferson County. Our mission is educating and motivating individuals, organizations, businesses, and municipalities to achieve the 3 E's. Sustain Jefferson was founded on the principles of the Natural Step. If you're living in this county, you need to understand this organization, you need to understand the Natural Step, and you need to see how these NGOs fit together with the regional planning organizations and the American Planning Association, so that they can remake your communities and remake your way of life. If you don't stop them, and they're well down the road, they're going to win. You're going to lose. The population's going to become very stressed. The Natural Step was founded in Sweden in 1989 by a scientist named Carl Henrik Robert. Robert developed the Natural Step framework following publication of the Brundtland Report in 1987. The Natural Step is another of the Agenda 21 sponsors. It is a local globalist training program. Now here are 2 more cohorts that we're going to talk about. 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin, Green Tier Legacy, tied into the American Planning Association, and the Green Tier communities. And I can see and I've heard a lot of you are familiar and aware and have begun to take on the Green Tier. That's great. Keep going. Let's look at it a little more closely. 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin first. Well, it was founded in 1996 by a diverse group of academics, conservationists, lawyers, elected officials, and business people. Public-private partners. The guys who wanted to get on board with the inside group, with that high school clique that you always kind of wanted to stay away from. Well, the guys who joined those high school cliques are now the business people joining with 1,000 Friends of Washington, becoming sustainable developers, being part of the inside. Their vision is to promote and advocate beneficial land, water, and air use policies. That doesn't say much, does it? Their vision is to abolish private property, to evaluate and update implementation of smart growth law. They're going to stack and pack people. That's their objective. That's the purpose of these kinds of organizations. And educate and market smart growth concepts using through the Green Tier communities. You see, all these NGOs are interrelated. In fact, here we'll see Green Tier Legacy Communities from the APA newsletter, A New Pathway to Sustainability by some guy named Steve Henniker, the executive director of 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin. We're talking about Green Tier. He goes, it's a collaboration between 1,000 Friends and the Wisconsin League of Municipalities. We'll talk about them in a moment. the University of Wisconsin Center on Wisconsin Strategy, and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, no surprise. The natural step, the legacy community is a legally binding agreement between the municipality and the state. The charter is designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, get you out of your cars, reduce energy use, turn off your lights, and develop a transportation system that improves transit service and walking and biking opportunities. Well, I won't come to Wisconsin in February. All policies need to be consistent with and complementary to the municipality's comprehensive plan. So the organization for this remake is coming from many sources, but they're all linked together. You know, and Rosa Corey, another Northern Californian, says, you know, the problem is you got 10 organizations in any town, and there's 6 people running all 10 of them. It's the same people over and over. Now, they do have more than 6 people, but their numbers of people aren't great. Their numbers of organizations are great. There's more ways for them to collect money from contributors who don't know what they're doing. Legacy community is a green tier charter. They say the benefits of participating in legacy communities include the following: direct access to the DNR. Oh boy. You get their expertise and technical assistance. I don't think there's anybody in this room that wants their expertise at how it is they're going to take your forest or your farm from you. But that's what DNR does. 2, potential to receive discretionary funding and preference in awarding state grants. Well, there's an epidemic of this sweeping the country. In California, we passed, along with 8 other states, something called B corporations. B meaning benefit corporations. And under B corporation legislation in California, it comes to the same result as this. If you are a B corporation, meaning you will implement sustainability policies, you get to go to the front of the line for every state issue. And you get tax breaks. You know, the idea is that the public-private partners get all the breaks, the real entrepreneurs get the shaft, and that's how freedom is taken down. Discretionary funding and preference in awarding state grants creates a forum to be recognized for achievements in sustainable development. Oh, they lure these silly people because they get a plaque with their name on it. It's ridiculous. An advanced position amongst competitive communities. I don't quite understand what that means. I didn't know that our communities were competing with each other, but they seem to provide that. And provides collaboration and information regarding networking with experienced municipalities. Okay? And 6, allows for enlightened self-interest. Now we're not talking about Ayn Rand's definition of enlightened self-interest here. In fact, they have a definition of what enlightened self-interest is. This is what it is. It's feeling good about yourself for contributing to the common good. Green Tier is about creating incentives for buddies and beneficiaries of the new economic order. The Green Tier program rolls out a new economic system that uses social manipulation to destroy free enterprise. We're talking about a new American system of economics where insiders pick the winners and losers. Today's government operates like the clique at junior high. Sustainabilities are in, others are out. Because the Green Tier legacy community is legally recognized by the state for their willingness to undertake Agenda 21 Sustainable Development Objectives. These member organizations will be allowed to go to the front of the line for licenses, permits, and tax incentives. The municipalities that refuse to become Green Tier legacy communities will simply have to wait. Government uses these elite communities to accomplish their social engineering ideals and to acquire more power without having to answer to voters. The Wisconsin sustainability movement is very coordinated. Either Wisconsin's the worst I've seen, or every month, things everywhere get more and more coordinated. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Ooh. The National League of Cities works in partnership with 49 state municipal leagues, including the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Every city in the state of Wisconsin is a member of the league. So every town in Wisconsin has an organization bringing sustainability. And that organization that provides that for every city in this state is the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. The National League of Cities is an NGO that works to bring Agenda 21 into every city in America. Your tax dollars are being spent to make your town an outpost of the rising global order. Either we surrender or we get these organizations out of your town. Remember, NGOs are non-accredited organizations, non-governmental organizations. NGOs are non-governmental organizations which are accredited by the United Nations for purposes of implementing sustainable development. Let's look at a typical NGO. The Wisconsin Sustainability Network, a united effort to make Wisconsin a leader in green technology, renewable energy, and sustainable business practices. The Wisconsin Sustainability Network will serve as a unified state resource to help Wisconsin businesses succeed and gain competitive advantage through sustainability strategies. They think that this strategy of economic fascism combined with total political control gives competitive advantages. I don't understand that. Competitive advantages to what? Beat up on people? To take the society down? To destroy our economy? Unanswered questions. The Wildlands Network, in operation here in Wisconsin, is helping to create and implement policies and legislation that promote massive land grabs. Let's look at the Wisconsin Council on Forestry. The statewide forest plan seeks a common vision, a framework for achieving that vision. It incorporates the full range of trends and issues affecting Wisconsin's forests and their ecological, economic, and social implications. You're totally wrapped up in the baseline philosophy of sustainable development. Most importantly, the plan is a call to all interested parties to address the challenges facing Wisconsin's forests, both now and in the future. The framework referred to here comes straight out of Agenda 21, Chapter 11, for those interested in the forestry issues. And it's the beginning of the end for private forest owners. This is a total deflection of a landowner's management prerogatives. It keeps the independent forest owner from making decisions. Wisconsin's Forest Sustainability Framework, the sustainable forestry, the practice of managing dynamic forest ecosystems to provide ecological, economic, social, and cultural benefits for the present and future generations. That's standard Agenda 21 language. You'll see the same thing written in Italy. The regional and international context for the Wisconsin Forest Sustainability Framework, the regional and international context. It's a broad context of similar regional, national, and international planning efforts. Their framework is that, international planning efforts. The International System of Criteria and Indicators, called C&I, known as the Montreal Process, was developed during the United Nations Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. Wisconsin's Forest Sustainability Framework, straight out of the World Order. You know, I go to states after state, and of course in California, our trees are growing so thick that nothing grows on the ground. Animals can't eat. And then when the fires come, they burn so hot and so heavy, they destroy everything, the soil included. See, we don't have a natural forest in America. We've been using these forests. And now we've stopped using them, and we've let them go natural. And what's the consequence? Well, you go to Montana, and 50% of the trees are dead. They're standing and they're dead. Diseased trees are everywhere because they're growing too thick. You go anywhere in the West, and the wildfires are nothing like what they used to be. When they burn hot, and they burn long, and they burn far. We didn't have forest fires like this 30 years ago. It's the compilation of the sustainability framework that leads to the burning of America's forests. Chapter 11 of the Agenda 21 also includes urban forests as well. So what's an urban forest? Well, we get a definition here. An urban forest is all the trees and other vegetation in and around a town, village, or city. Trees in your suburban yard are part of that urban forest. See, what this is really designed to do is to monitor and control urban residents. In the end, it's all about the apples on the tree in your backyard. Whose apples are they? Well, if your tree is part of the urban forest, it's a collective asset. That's where we're heading with this. ICLEI is involved in sustainable forestry themselves. Talking trees. You know, it took me 3 days to figure this out, but I was finally told Talking Trees is a book they have. I guess the trees don't really talk. They just have a book called Talking Trees, an urban forestry toolkit for local governments. Milwaukee, case study number 1, financing and managing the urban forest, page 47. Comprehensive planning at work. Let's take a quick look at agriculture. Urban agriculture is being adopted by the green jobs movement. You heard me right, urban agriculture. And it offers workforce development programs targeted to needy populations such as formerly incarcerated individuals, the homeless, and marginalized communities. This is nothing more than slave labor as it's being established. This urban farm is 3 acres it comes from a 3-acre parcel in Milwaukee.
Will Allen. Yes, Allen.
Somebody knows who it is?
Will Allen.
Will Allen, okay. The vision, they always have visions, inspiring communities to build sustainable food systems that are equitable and ecologically sound, creating a just world, one food secure community at a time, the urban farm. Now, I've seen writings where people think these little 3-acre parcels in cities of 1 million people are going to feed the population. Such nonsense, you know. If they're, and then they wanted to turn most farm areas into wildlands areas where human beings can't be. We're being squeezed down. But if you know, it all makes sense once you take into consideration the population reduction goals. Urban farming is not the way to feed the American public. And anyone, foolish or not, understands that. Agenda 21 is coming in through Thrive communities, resilient communities, transition towns, communities that care, etc. All kinds of organizations are swarming the nation to take us down these kinds of paths. If you have a farm outside the urban boundaries, it might look like something like this. Sustain rural Wisconsin. Our vision for agriculture is that we make full use of the bullshit, the nutrients generated by the livestock. These people have a place in our government, in government decisions. Our vision for communities, the organization supports and promotes communities where the majority of foods consumed are generated within 300 miles, and public facilities serve locally grown foods. Imagine, people are objecting to New York City's no larger than a 12-ounce can of Coke or something. Well, here in Wisconsin, they plan to make restaurants serve locally grown foods. Things are getting crazy. No wonder they're shutting down the Central Valley of California. Wisconsin doesn't want us anymore. They don't need us anymore. These communities are places where green tourism, I've been in Nowhere, Montana, in desert Texas, in all kinds of hard to get to unpopulated areas. And the scheme everywhere you go for promoting sustainable development in these rural areas is, while we're getting people out of their cars in the urban area, we're going to promote tourism in your remote rural area. Doesn't make any sense, ladies and gentlemen, because green tourism is an oxymoron. They say it flourishes and provides urban dwellers with the benefits of time spent in the rural landscape. They're going to ride their bike 300 miles out. So in the first section, I said you need to get USDA out of Wisconsin. That may sound like a rather rebellious notion, but let's take a look at the USDA. I didn't make this. This is their website. You got the 3 E's with different words: community, stewardship, and prosperity. Sustainable development, USDA, making a sustainable difference. Some of you are too far away to know what that is, but those up close know that's the UN insignia. New! The United Nations World Summit on Sustainable Development. Here it says guiding principles for USDA sustainable development, USDA policy statement on sustainable development, USDA Council on Sustainable Development, our partner links for sustainable development. 220 times in the USDA regulatory documents make reference to Agenda 21. 220 times. You see, our federal agencies are the implementing forces for the imposition of global governance in America. As a result, farmers have often had to succumb to becoming partners with an oversized federal gorilla. If you're taking federal subsidies, that's the first step down this road. Or get swallowed up by a sustainable insider, or do business with the Nature Conservancy. Here's the USDA Office of Chief Economist on Sustainable Development. This is what he says. The U.S. government has joined with foreign governments, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, academia, and the private sector, the partners, to plan and implement voluntary partnerships that promote economic growth, social development, and environmental stewardship. You say, well, it's voluntary. Yeah, you don't join it, you're out. If you're not one of the insiders, you're one of the outsiders. You got a short life. USDA, Office of Chief Economist. So who gave the federal government stewardship over the citizens' land? Have we been taken over? What system protects property better and derives more societal benefits? A central government, or you and me and other individuals working to mutual interest? The private landowner committed to private interests produces superior results compared to a collectivist organization committed to the common good. This is true whether the measurement is production or stewardship. This is the part that always bothers me the most. I mean, people might be depressed right now. If you are, hold your hanky because it gets worse. The U.S. partnership inspiring sustainable development, integrating sustainable development into education. The vision, sustainable development, fully integrated into education and learning in the United States. Mission is to leverage the UN decade to foster education for sustainable development in the United States. What are they talking about? Over here, the UN Decade for Education for Sustainable Development, 2005 to 2014. In polling, we learned that a majority of 2009 high school and college graduates, a majority, identify themselves as global citizens, not as Americans. Sustainability is being jammed down every youngster's throat, and the future is at risk. This one is a curiosity to me. Sustainable Systems Engineering, a Master's of Engineering degree at UW-Madison. Anybody who in this audience who's an engineer ought to be insulted by what they're about to see. Sustainability has transformed from a concept to a global imperative. The University of Wisconsin-Madison's Master of Engineering and Sustainable Systems Engineering program is designed to prepare you to understand and drive change within your organization as it relates to complex systems and their impact on the quality of water, land, air, energy, economics, and society. A master's in sustainability to deal with all those issues? We're in trouble. The University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh, Sustainability, Earth Charter, the Community Summit, Values and Principles for a Sustainable Future. In 2002, Oshkosh became one of only 8, there are more now, colleges and universities that, as an entire institution, endorses the Earth Charter. No wonder kids today are so confused. See, starting in kindergarten, the children are being scared, indoctrinated, and sorted in accordance with their usefulness to world government and world religion. For those of you who are here for Beverly's discussion of the state of Nebraska, all I can say is if I was in Nebraska, I would not put my child in a public school. But then I'm a Californian. I will not put my child in government school. And if I lived here, I would not put my child in government school. Education for sustainability in Wisconsin. Education in Wisconsin schools. Students gain awareness, knowledge, skills, attitudes, and experiences necessary to become lifelong learners who are literate in sustainability, socially responsible, and passionately involved in their communities.
Not reading and writing and arithmetic.
There's no reading, writing, and arithmetic. Lenin had the same goals. Vladimir Lenin, that is. Education for sustainability in your schools. Drones is what they're making our children into. Here's more from that organization. Their mission is to education for sustainability, affecting their ways of thinking, to promote a healthy and livable world. This is their organization at a glance. And what you notice, student, teaching, school, community. There's no parents or religion in there. That's because the schools don't have parents built into the system from which they are teaching. They'll patronize you make you think you're part of the process. But this is their plan. Again, it's their website, not mine. And what they're trying to do is take the student and integrate them to the community. The school system is indoctrinating our children into global citizenship through a commitment to teaching globalist ideology. They are not being taught the values of the American experiment. They are being fed fear regarding climate issues. Little children are being brainwashed at school. So we've got to ask the question, to whom do the children belong? Who decides these important questions of child rearing? Take your children back. Examine what your schools are doing. We must reverse the localized globalist advance. If these programs and initiatives proceed unabated, this is what you need to imagine. Area behind this sign closed. National Wildlife Refuge, entry prohibited. Wildlands and wetlands. Historic, beetle corridor, mountain lion habitat. Green eco villages. I know this is good over here. High density living and right on the railroad. We have a book of these sustainable cartoons. It's just been released in the last 10 days, back on our back table, which is kind of straight down from where I am. And if you like cartoons, you might want to check that book out. So the vision, as illustrated here, is animals roaming freely while humans are constrained. Communities surrounded by open space that ultimately you cannot access. In these communities, human action is monitored and controlled, and New World human settlements or smart growth patterns are connected by public transportation corridors. Agenda 21 deceptively uses warm and fuzzy terms designed to lead people into believing they will live happily in regions comprised of sustainable communities. Cool cities with climate action compacts, smart growth neighborhoods, walkable communities, and transit villages as human population is grinded and culled. All brought to you under a United Nations program courtesy of the federal executive branch, Democrats and Republicans. Today, all cabinet-level departments have deployed termites to nationalize and localize Agenda 21 policy. This is how our cities are being sucked in. Real leaders are needed at City Hall and on the school board. Defederalize our communities. Defeat the globalist assault on America. Let America re-emerge as America, a land where people are politically recognized as possessing natural or unalienable rights. The original American concept is the culmination of Western achievement, a recognition that man is made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore all law must reflect this natural foundation. Consider what has been illustrated here tonight. Regionalism, smart growth, public-private partnerships, the Wildlands Network, all components of sustainable ideology. The federal government, with its taxing policies and its conditions for strings for return of those tax dollars, allows the federal government to exert dominant pressure on states and increasingly on local governments through sustainability requirements and incentives. DC's commitment to America's transformation into a global political economic system is clear today. Every hometown has experienced elements of this transformation. Is that all right with you? What are we leaving our children? Why are we abandoning the American pursuit of individual liberty and equal justice? As the dollar begins its accelerating crash around us, Rock River, and all of Wisconsin, all of America, have been set up as a region to operate within and under a new system of government. With this transformation comes the end of the American experiment. Lost is the idea of private property. The path for Americans will become very hard if ordinary people do not reverse Agenda 21 implementation. You can help reverse this process. So what is it you can do? Well, start by thinking locally. The answers are not going to come from Washington, D.C. Expose the regional Soviet system running your local government. That battle is where freedom will be won or lost. Go after and expose the regional planning commissions, Sustain Jefferson, Sustainable Madison, Green Tier Legacy Communities, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, the Wisconsin Sustainability Network, Sustain Rural Wisconsin, and ICLEI for what they are. A massive fifth column, an outpost of the new totalitarians. Remember the essence of your mission. Restore the principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence. Protect life, liberty, and private property. Next, don't compromise the principles of freedom. Compromise the price of a loaf of bread, but not the principles of freedom. Fight smart growth and the wildlands network in your area. Restore the idea of private property. And then look behind the green mask. Discover the philosophical folly that is the environmental movement. And so what are our demands? Well, the federal government is where the transformation is coming from. It is now everywhere, including here. So take counteraction locally. Local proaction is our best strategy to stave off world government at this late date. Get the federal government out of your county and then out of Wisconsin. This means having your city withdraw from the RPC. RPC membership is voluntary. The problem, of course, is that when you withdraw from the MPC, you don't get federal dollars back. But if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, would you rather have that $250 billion to remake the Bay Area into a walkable community? Or would you rather have the feds keep their money? I say, kick RPC out of your county, and if that means losing some federal funds, cause other counties to kick the federal government out, and pretty soon we'll have ourselves heat. First in Madison, and then in Washington. Kick the federal government out of your county and state. I suggest that you start with the U.S. Forest Service and the USDA. Kick out the Federal Department of Interior, and kick out the Federal Department of Education. Then it's your job to remove the change agents from all the local governing boards and substitute them with real Americans like yourself. Third, terminate all public contracts and contacts with NGOs. That means you get rid of the American Planning Association in your city. And finally, render the contracts with ICLEI as void. They are void under the U.S. Constitution, as we discussed earlier. And remove all policy that resulted from the ICLEI Association. Do this first in your town, and then do it statewide. If you understand your area's local Agenda 21 program, you can win back your town and neighborhood from Agenda 21 policies. Then you can move on to a broader area. Ultimately, people will combine with others working similarly around Washington. You must expunge sustainable development policy from your state's law and out of Washington's bureaucracy. The globalist course can be reversed, but soon it will become too late. America's political establishment leaders are implementing Agenda 21, and this is the problem. So it is up to the citizens. Real Americans will rise as new and good leaders. But first, citizens must know how globalism is the enemy of freedom. With that information, we must defeat local implementation of Agenda 21. Because if people do nothing, America becomes the land of the collected and home of the enslaved. When enough states have recaptured their citizens' liberty, the federal government can be taken on effectively. Until then, the federal government is simply lost. But when we have recovered our local and state governments, we will have salvaged the American experiment in individual liberty, equal justice, and the political recognition of every individual's unalienable rights. Long live the United States of America, and long live freedom-loving people everywhere. Thank you.